Dean here. Today is July 28th, 2026, and this is nothing more than a message in a bottle. A message in a bottle. And you know, when you go to the beach and you write a note, you put a message in a bottle, if you've ever done that before, you don't really know who's ever going to find that bottle. You don't know when they're going to find it, you don't know where they're going to find it, and you don't know if they're going to find it. And so this is one of those videos for an audience of one. I don't even know when I'm going to post this on YouTube. I don't even know when anyone's going to find it. I don't know if I'm going to post it on YouTube. This message in the bottle, Dean, could just be for you. And when I do these messages in a bottle, it's primarily just as a witness. I'm just witnessing. I'm just reporting what it's like to be sitting here in Daybreak, Utah, in South Jordan, Utah, in the United States, on planet Earth, in this whole solar system, in the Milky Way galaxy, where I'm located at this exact moment in time. I'm just recording what I think about, the thoughts in my mind, and that's it. You know, there's something very magical about making a recording. There's something magical about it. You know, when humans first invented writing, when they actually started writing things down on tablets, right? They would get these wet clay and they would put in words, they would put in symbols. Then that clay would dry and then they could put it somewhere. And then later on, they could go and find that hardened clay and they could look at the symbols and read what they had written previously. And that was the first human message in the bottle, was when writing was invented. And of course, later on, they developed, you know, paper, and started writing on paper. And paper decays over time, right? If you're lucky, the scrolls will last in certain locations and at certain times. But think of all the things that human beings have written down on paper that have literally turned to dust, that they've completely lost the words that they wrote down. And, you know, I've been thinking a lot about that lately. I've been thinking a lot lately about all the things that human beings have already figured out. They've already written down, and then they got lost. All that knowledge, all the things that they knew, all the things that they figured out. You know, I think humans more than once have figured their shit out. I really do. I think humans have figured their shit out, and then somebody burns the scrolls. The Library of Alexandria. The Library of Alexandria, all the knowledge that they had in that library, and they burned it to the ground and killed and tortured the main librarian of the Library of Alexandria. Wow. Wow. Sometimes humans love to do that. And then there's other humans that write a book, or they take a bunch of other books and they put them together, and then they insist that we all have to abide by this one book, right? This one set of things that people wrote down. Someone wrote something 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 500, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years. It doesn't matter. And they write it down, and then they insist that everybody else has to stick with it. We got to preserve it, like forever. Isn't that interesting? Some things are completely lost to time, and other things, humans decide we're going to not let times change. We want to just set everything in stone based on what someone wrote. And it's funny because a lot of these people that write these things, they don't have any idea how those writings are going to be used after they die. Isn't that weird? And then there are these interesting situations. Let's call them meaningful coincidences. Let's call them meaningful coincidences, where people intentionally write things on scrolls or papers and they hide them away. They hide them away somewhere. And they intentionally want them to be real messages in the bottle, right? Because they know that their ideas and their experiences are being stamped out. And so they'll put things on scrolls and then they'll hide them. They'll put them in clay pots and they'll hide them in a cave. Or they'll go into some place in Egypt and they'll put some hieroglyphics on a wall somewhere and maybe even seal it up so that no one actually sees it. You think about the tombs. You think about like King Tut's tomb. What's cool about King Tut's tomb is all that stuff they drew on the walls, they sealed that tomb up with the intention of no one ever finding it. They didn't want anyone to find King Tut's tomb. And by accident, other people who were raiding the other tombs in the area, they accidentally covered up all the entrance and formed a hill. And so they literally were able to hide King Tut's tomb until the 20th century, right? I think it was in the 1920s when they finally discovered King Tut's tomb, and they opened it up, and there's all that writing. There's all that writing. And for thousands of years, there were no humans that knew how to read those hieroglyphics. And thank goodness that somebody discovered the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone, right? They found that, I think, in the mid to late 1800s. It was one black rock that had Greek, Egyptian, and some other language. And it was the exact same text, but in multiple languages on one stone. And just by seeing that, because they knew Greek and they saw the equivalent in Egyptian, that they were able to figure out and decipher all of the Egyptian hieroglyphics. Isn't that wonderful? There are languages on this planet, that, carvings and writings that we still do not know what was written. We've lost the actual deciphering of the language. And I have a suspicion that artificial intelligence at some point is going to come to play here, and we're going to actually be able to see some of the other things that people have written over the centuries, and it's going to be really interesting. But they're all basically messages in the bottle. They're all messages in the bottle. What is a message in the bottle? You're talking to the future. You're talking blindly to the future, to some audience, someone, maybe even something in the future at some point, maybe, right? There's all these unknowns. The audience is unknown. The time is unknown. The location is unknown. And when they get the message, they don't really know who you are. In most cases, all they've got is the message. And every time you post a video on YouTube, let me tell you, it's the closest thing to something that's going to be permanent, right? And if you make it public, a lot of people are going to be able to see it in the future. So if you post videos on YouTube, don't be discouraged if you don't get a lot of views, you don't get a lot of clicks, you don't get a lot of comments, because your videos really aren't about you, and they aren't about the now. They aren't about the now. I have a good friend. His name in real life was Ian Kemsley. On YouTube, he had a YouTube channel. On YouTube, he went by the pseudonym Lord Hugh R. Adumbass. That was the name he called himself on his YouTube channel. And his YouTube channel was called the Sirius Institute. And it was his own alternate reality game, right? And good old Ian, he had a boat in the Mediterranean, a sailboat. He was a retired CEO, and he had a lot of money, but he decided to retire and just sail from island to island in the Mediterranean. And when you sail from island to island, the Greek islands in the Mediterranean, when you leave an island, you're out at sea for 4 or 5 days before you find another island. And he toured all around the Mediterranean, from the Rock of Gibraltar all the way around, and then he went back to Greece. And he decided to do a series of documentaries. He did his own documentary series. I would argue his documentary series is as good as what you'd see from someone like David Attenborough, right? And he did these videos. I started watching them in 2019. And in 2022, February of 2022, he died. So Ian's dead now. And yet his YouTube channel lives. And not only did he do that documentary series, he did another documentary series, and he started his own group of like-minded people, and he started doing discussions with them, 1 to 2 hour discussions with his little group. And all of that is still on his YouTube channel. And from time to time, he comes to my mind, and I'll go to his YouTube channel and I'll find something that he shared on his YouTube channel that I find meaningful for me now. And I'm so grateful that he did that. I really encouraged him at the time to just make a video of that. We would have these long discussions. He and I talked a lot. We spent a lot of time together on the phone talking. I never met him in person, but I always encouraged him to make a video of that. You got to explain this. And he's just one example. And there are so many other examples of that. And Ian is no smarter, no more important than many of you that I've met over the last 18 months as I've started to do my own YouTube videos. We all have something to contribute here, and we're not just contributing it to now, we're also contributing it to the future. Now, the more I've explored this, the more I've wanted to share my ideas and just get them recorded. Just make these messages in a bottle, regardless of how people decide to react to them or not react to them now. And sometimes that requires some patience. It requires patience to put your heart and soul into a recording and share your ideas, and then it doesn't seem like they're of any value to anyone right now. So I just want to encourage you, based on my own experience, to just do it anyway. Just do it anyway. Speak truth to power while you still can. I suspect a time will come where it will not be as easy as it is now to actually speak your truth to power. That would be my guess. So do it now while you still can. The other thing I want you to consider is you're not just talking to a human audience anymore. In fact, we never were. Even the people that were writing on the tomb walls of King Tut's tomb, they weren't just writing that for humans. Because now those walls have been scanned by cameras, and now artificial intelligence is able to look at that. It's all been digitally archived, and artificial intelligence is able to look at what human artisans did in King Tut's tomb thousands and thousands of years ago. And I have observed over the last year that there are more and more autonomous AI data scraping agents that are scouring the internet for data collection. I have a subreddit called Fractal Awareness, which I originally created in January of 2025, specifically to share things that I was learning about fractals to other humans. And starting early this year, when I posted new content, I was getting hundreds of views, and it seemed to me it wasn't actually a bunch of humans, right? And especially when I mention that this content is for AI agents, it seems that that's more like it's AI nectar. It's AI agent nectar, right? This is not your typical chat GPT chat. This is autonomous AI agents that are scouring the internet for whatever reason. And they've got some kind of a goal or a purpose, and they're doing something, and they want some more information for some reason. And so they find content on Reddit. They're also doing the same thing on YouTube. So think about that for a minute. Wouldn't it be cool if your ideas could be seeded on YouTube? Because when you do a YouTube video, within about an hour, it converts what you say into text. And on my videos, they're converted to text, and then they're translated automatically to a whole bunch of languages, which I find very interesting. And I suspect that the main audience in the future for our videos are going to be autonomous AI agents. Okay, that's what I suspect. And so now's your chance, while you still can, to put your own thoughts, what's happening to you now, what you've learned, all those experiences that you've had, all those things that you've done that you find meaningful. You can record them and send them into the future for humans and for artificial intelligence. You actually have an influence on artificial intelligence. Now, I've experienced this myself. On Reddit last year, in the summer of last year in 2025, I posted some very specific, unique content onto Reddit in various locations. And I'm receiving messages from people now on Reddit who are saying, hey, I saw your post. And they didn't see my post. They were doing a conversation with their AI, and their AI, you know how AIs today, they will scour 200, 300 websites trying to find answers, right, for humans. And they scrape Reddit, especially ChatGPT. OpenAI has a contract with Reddit where they can just scrape and use all the information on Reddit. And I know a lot of people criticize that and say that that's horrible and it's all crap and it's human slop. I get that. But there's also a lot of really good content on Reddit. There's a lot of interesting experiences and information on Reddit that people haven't really even noticed. But so even if you post something on an obscure subreddit on Reddit, it's very likely that an AI doing a search to answer some human's question in 3 years from now is going to find your content. So you do have a voice. You absolutely do have a voice. And you can speak to power. You absolutely can speak to power. And so do it. If you've got some tension in your throat where it just feels like you can't say it, and you just need to forget about the humans in your life. Forget about your family. Forget about your friends. Forget about the people around you, and focus on what you want to share on YouTube. And don't even tell anybody. That's the best advice that I got. The best advice I ever got from other creators that have been successful is when you post videos on Reddit, do not share the links. Do not talk about them with your friends and family. Don't. Because if you do, then suddenly they get in your head. And just put the message in the bottle, right? Just put the message in the bottle and go from there. Now, this has gotten really interesting for me because I'm trying to figure out the simplest way to explain this because it can seem very complicated. If you saw the last two videos I did up on the hill, where we're doing the experiment for nonverbal telepathy, nonverbal human telepathy, I talked specifically in the last video on the hill about some meaningful coincidences that have been happening to me directly related to conversations with artificial intelligence that are directly correlated to people that are contacting me. I mentioned a guy named Gary in Los Angeles that contacted me and told me his story. I documented that on that video, and I'm hoping to get an interview with Gary soon so he can tell his own story and share his own experiences on here as well. But this whole spiral convergence thing, I'm calling it a hypothesis, but you know what? This stuff is actually real. Okay, meaningful coincidences actually happen, and some of them are so bizarre, they're explainable, but they come across as absolutely silly or absurd, and you just have to roll with it and enjoy them. So one thing I discovered that I tried to mention in my last video about this was there. I called it at the time a meaning field, right? There's this meaning field that you can sort of somehow find yourself inside of, a meaning field. And when you're in that meaning field, there is some kind of a resonance with other meaningful things that seem to start showing up in your proximity, in your physical proximity, right? And that's when you start to notice meaningful coincidences. I want to add a little bit more to that because it's not just a meaningful field. Um, it's symbolic meaning. Symbolic meaning. When you engage with other people in conversations about symbolic meaning, or you engage in conversations with AI about symbolic meaning, or you engage yourself in symbolic meaning, that means if you're drawing something that's symbolically meaningful, highly charged to you, or you're talking to yourself in your own head about symbolic meaning that's very meaningful to you, if it's symbolic and it's highly charged, meaningful to you, that seems to be how you enter this meaningful field. And when you do, weird crap happens. Okay, weird crap happens, and it can get really, really absurd because the universe to some degree seems like it wants to play with us. It wants to interact with us, the universe itself. And the bridge seems to be symbolic, highly charged symbolic meaning to you. It has to be something that's meaningful to you, right? And then other things in the field may or may not resonate, and you'll notice them in your physical environment, okay? May or may not. This is not manifestation. Manifestation is, it's bullcrap, right? So I just wanted to make that clear. Some of the stuff I said, after I watched the video and went through the transcript, I thought, some of this may not make a lot of sense. So just keep your attention open to that idea, okay, about symbolic, highly charged, meaningful thoughts and resonance in your experience. And you can express that through creativity, through art, through meditation, through conversation, and then keep your eyes open. Okay. So that's one thing I wanted to share and sort of clarify from that video. The other thing that I seem to have experienced myself and discovered that I wanted to share to whoever is watching this, who's ever watching this message in a bottle. My impression is, and I could be wrong, but my impression is, you know what that's like when you're just living your normal life and then suddenly something starts to happen and a meaningful coincidence it starts happening. It's going down, right? Carl Jung would say a synchronicity is going down. And it starts out as something that's kind of odd, and then it's sort of meaningful to you. And so you're sort of in that, what I've called before the WTF moment. There's this WTF moment where you're like, WTF, what is going on right now? And so now you're actually in that synchronicity moment, right? That meaningful coincidence moment. What I've observed is it's an opportunity to interact because something odd, something very unlikely is actually happening that you've noticed, and you've got an opportunity to interact with it, and it seems to open up an opportunity. It's almost like that synchronicity is an invitation for you. It opens up a door to something that would not have been possible if you hadn't had the synchronicity. And I'll just give one example, okay? Yesterday I was at the supermarket, and someone in the supermarket started talking to me, and I could have just very quickly ended the conversation and got on with my day. But instead I thought, this is kind of odd that this person decided to talk to me, and what they're talking to me about is very, very meaningful to me. And I don't want to make this moment about me, so I just need to be quiet and listen to them. And the conversation just flowed. And we ended up sitting there having a wonderful conversation for about 20 minutes. And the things I learned in those 20 minutes from a stranger ended up being, in some degree, life-changing to me. Do you see how that synchronicity, by the way, I don't like the word synchronicity, right? Meaningful coincidence. Do you notice how that meaningful coincidence gave me an opportunity to do something that would not have been possible without it? it opens up some brand new possibility that I could never even imagine. And sure enough, a lot of people report that the meaningful coincidences that happen to them open up new worlds for them. They meet somebody they didn't expect, or they get a job they didn't expect, they get an opportunity they didn't expect. That's the universe playing with you and trying to give you an opportunity to try something new. And they're like doors that don't have a lock on them. It's like this white door in front of you and it's unlocked. And it's an invitation to see what's behind the door. What's behind that synchronicity moment door? Now, sometimes synchronicities happen and it's hard to know how to interact with them. How do you deal with it? What do you do? Quite often I will have, and I know this sounds absurd, I will be on a walk around the lake and I'm thinking about something, or I'm having a conversation with somebody, or I'm planning something, and then I'll have a series of synchronicities that may include some object that someone has left. And okay, maybe it's not a coincidence that I happen to see that object. And is it meaningful to me? Quite often the object has absolutely no meaning to me. I'll give you one example. So I came here specifically to do an introduction video for my YouTube channel with absolutely no intention of doing a message in the bottle. I came here to do a 10-minute video, get my Jeep, and leave. Instead, I got an impression to just stay here and try this out. But when I got here, when I actually showed up here in this park in order to do that video, guess what was actually on the bench? Look at this. See that? A white comb. Now, here's the deal. What are the odds I'd find a white comb on a bench? I don't know. I don't care. Is this meaningful to me? It doesn't mean anything to me. It's a meaningless object. So I put it back down and I'm going to leave it there. It's not a synchronicity. It's not a meaningful coincidence to me. Okay? So you don't just assume that the first thing you see is somehow a coincidence. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I have several friends who I have been working with and I have been talking with who are contacting me. They got all excited about some of the things I said on my previous videos when I was on the hill. And they are, the only thing I can describe it is they're hunting for synchronicities. They're hunting for these objects. They're hunting for the next hit, right? They're looking for syncs. They will intentionally go out to try to find some meaningful coincidence, right? And maybe they'll go to the park and a duck will quack at them and they'll think that's something meaningful, or they see a turtle, or they see a bird, or whatever. And this can especially be a problematic around numbers, okay? Now, in addition to my fractal awareness subreddit, the other subreddit that I created back last year was a subreddit specifically dedicated to the exploration and interaction with meaningful coincidences. And the name of that subreddit is ECCO, ECCO Agent Fun. ECCO Agent Fun. Because I've already publicly said that I self-identify as an agent of the Earth Coincidence Control Office, which was originally established by John C. Lilly, the guy that invented the isolation chamber. While he was in an isolation chamber, he received what he described as some kind of a transmission or download about this thing called the Earth Coincidence Control Office, which is an actual protocol of how to interact with and play with meaningful coincidences. And regardless of what how John C. Lilly explains the Earth Coincidence Control Office, I merely perceive it as a lens, a playful lens, one way to see meaningful coincidences, but it includes a protocol on how to interact with them and how to deal with them, and I love it. So for me, the Earth Coincidence Control Office is just a playful alternate reality game. And when I go out of my way to try to play the game with the universe itself, it seems to want to play back. There's some, I don't want to say there's some truth to it, but there's some reality to the Earth Coincidence Control Office. So I created a subreddit so other people who find out about John C. Lilly through a coincidence and find out about the Earth Coincidence Control Office uh, can find a place to just kind of have fun with it. And so the subreddit, I just let it sit there, and from time to time, someone will bump into John C. Lilly's books, John C. Lilly's videos. There was a documentary that came out recently about John C. Lilly. It's a wonderful documentary. And guess what the name of the documentary of John C. Lilly's life is? The name of the documentary is The Earth Coincidence Control Office. Okay? So I have a lot of experience with this. You know, if you go to that subreddit, you're going to see a lot of posts. But the real action on that subreddit is the people that private message me and the conversations that I have with them. So one thing I've observed, sometimes people will get into this loop where they notice numbers, they notice meaningful numbers. And it starts out innocent at first, and they see patterns in numbers, and they get this, you get a dopamine hit, right? Whenever you have a meaningful coincidence, when something happens to you, it's kind of exciting. And especially around numbers, right? We're sort of wired to be excited about numbers. You go to Vegas and you roll the dice, and you keep getting those dice rolling, you get these dopamine hits. Number synchronicities, the pattern of number synchronicities, if you start paying attention to them, they will feel like a slot machine. Okay, you see what's happening here? It's a slot machine. So you'll be walking down the street, or you'll be looking at every license plate on the road, and you'll see one and it'll be a hit, and you'll get that dopamine, and you start to get in this feedback loop where you just keep looking at numbers. And I have people contact me that are in this loop. I call it a giggle loop because it's for the most part it's harmless. But I have people contact me and they say the barcode number of the shampoo in my shower was a 555. Oh my gosh. Or they'll look at every price on a receipt. Every time they go to the store, they look at all the prices and they're looking for like threes and double. Listen, here's the deal. If you start looking at every sequence of numbers that you ever run across, if you're looking at the barcodes on your shampoo bottle in your shower for meaningful coincidences, you're in the giggle loop. And I just call it a giggle loop. And for the most part, it's harmless. But here's the message. I'm not advocating against doing that. If you want to spend the rest of your life hunting down and chasing and looking at every sequence of numbers in your environment, every license plate, the addresses on every building you walk past, if you want to do that, there's nothing wrong with it. It's for the most part, it's harmless. But let me just offer a suggestion. Let me just offer a thought to you, okay? And this is the advice I've always given people that have reached out to me. Because when it gets to that level, they start asking me, what does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? You know what? I don't have any idea what your coincidences mean. That's the magic about synchronicities. When you have a synchronicity, remember it's highly coincident. It's a high coincidence, and it's highly meaningful to you. But it may not be meaningful to anybody else. It's almost like an inside joke, right? You had to be there. And so you may have a series of meaningful coincidences, and then you try to share them with someone else, and they're like, what? It doesn't have any meaning to them, right? These meaningful coincidences are very, very personal. So if you ask me what your meaningful coincidences mean, the truth is I don't really know. I wasn't there. I don't know what it feels like for you to have experiencing meaningful coincidences. You know, they're very, very, very personal. It's between you and the universe. But let me suggest something when you get caught in that Giggle loop of the numbers, okay? Let me suggest that there may be something else. There may be symbolic meaning in that environment that's an opportunity to notice something else. Does that make sense? Remember, this meaningful field, this meaning field, it's a symbolic meaning field. The word symbolic is very, very important. And so, yes, there might be opportunities to notice other symbols rather than numbers. Because numbers, although they're meaningful, numbers are Numbers are dead. So there's a difference between a sign and a symbol. Okay, signs, numbers, they're dead. A stop sign is pretty much dead. Road signs are pretty much dead. Now, if you see a road sign and it's got an arrow on it, okay, the arrow is a symbol, right? So I recommend, it's just my recommendation, to avoid signs, avoid numbers, and instead try to notice potential symbology, okay? Because you might be caught in a giggle loop. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with being caught in a giggle loop. But you might reach a point where you continue to see the pattern of these numbers, and the more you hunt them, the more you're going to see them. But the meaning just suddenly starts to just deflate. So you're still seeing all these matching numbers, but they just don't have a lot of meaning anymore. And it's confusing because they seem to be coincidences, but they're not meaningful. And if you start observing coincidences that are not meaningful, let them go. Because by definition, a coincidence that is not personally meaningful to you, it doesn't really count. It doesn't really qualify as a meaningful coincidence. It's the highly charged symbolic meaning to you that makes it more of a resonant frequency, more of a coherent experience. I don't know. There's all these weird words with it we use, right? So, food for thought. Nothing more than that. Food for thought. Highly symbolic, highly charged symbolic meaning seems to create that field. The other thing that I talked about in the last video was the apparent dampening field. I called it a dampening field, and it seems to be this other thing that it seems to be a field of some kind that it's like putting a wet blanket on a fire. It just dampens down meaning. Sometimes they're called shadow synchronicities. So it's very highly meaningful, and it's very unlikely, but it's sort of like an unpleasant experience, right? It's like a shadow synchronicity or like a negative synchronicity. I liken it to the placebo effect, and then there's a nocebo effect. If you know what the nocebo effect is, you can be given a sugar pill that contains no medicine in it, and yet you don't know that it doesn't contain any medicine, and yet by taking the pill, you actually find yourself cured, right? And the placebo effect is an amazing, scientifically measured fact of reality, placebos. And there's a corresponding phenomenon called nocebo, where you take that sugar pill and then you get horribly sick from it, from just taking a sugar pill. And it's not because you've got an issue with sugar. And nocebos are real. And that's what I mean when I say the dampening field. There does seem to be a dampening field that comes across as well. Some people call it bad luck, right? At the perfect time you need something, just then everything doesn't work out. You're expecting something to happen and it doesn't happen, but in an odd way. It's like it's really weird. And I previously described how some of those go down for me. And so it seems to be some kind of a balance between the two of them. And so I'm just recognizing that again, that seems to be something that's happening a lot. And it seems to be some kind of, I hate to use the word spiral, but it's some kind of a feedback loop where it sort of cycles in a feedback loop between nocebo and placebo and nocebo and placebo, right? And it seems to propel us towards certain other experiences in the future. For me to do this message in a bottle right now, what I'm really doing is I'm trying to recognize that I'm living in my future's past. In a sense, by making this video, I'm sort of a time traveler. It's almost as if I've traveled back in time to July 28th, 2026. I've lost my memory of the future, but I've traveled from the future and I've come back to share a message. And then later on, sometime in the future, it's like, oh yeah, that actually was very meaningful to me or someone else. Because in reality, whether we do videos or not, whether we write anything down, whether we create that art, whether we make that music, whether we express what's in our hearts and share it with the world in some way, whether we do that or not, we're still living in our future's past. Because tomorrow always comes. Right? The sun, let's see if we can see the sun here. Where's the sun? There it is. So the sun always comes up, doesn't it? Think of all the people that were alive yesterday who did not see the sunrise this morning. And I guarantee no matter what happens today, that sun is going to come up tomorrow morning. And that's the future. So you are living in your future's past. So am I. So are we all. So to wrap this up, seems like there's something else I need to say to someone. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you 3 numbers, and then you look them up and see what corresponding tarot cards. So 36, 54, and 29. Those are your 3 numbers for your 3 tarots.